Well, welcome to the Mountain Misfits podcast. And we are joined by Andy Loeb, who is a filmmaker who has done a couple of different feature length films on through hiking. So it's kind of I don't know, it's an endeavor that boggles my mind of anyone who even undertakes a through
Actually,
hike.
his achievements are a lot longer than
Okay,
what you just said.
We'll go through it. So, first of all, Andy, give us a little short introduction on who Andy is.
So my name is Andy Loeb. I'm based in California, and I am an independent documentary filmmaker. I have made lots of documentaries and stories, and featured a lot of stories that span any space of humans and nature, and kind of the spaces they meet. So I've done over half a dozen feature-length films, and I just completed my first documentary series, which is Through the Pacific Northwest. And it's my calling. It's not really a job. I love it.
So okay, first step is how did you get into filmmaking? Was it schooling? Was it self-taught?
I originally intended to set out to be a political reporter. So this is back in the kind of the 2000s, early 2000s. And my first assignment as the student news director of my college station was to cover the 2008 presidential election, which was a pretty momentous election, regardless of which side of the aisle you were on. And I covered that from the Iowa caucuses all the way to the inauguration. And I was just like a young buck, and I was just traveling all over and in the midst of everything. And it was really exciting, but I also found I saw through the show of it, and I also got kind of burned out. I mean, it was just a really relentless year of covering that story and watching those campaigns unfold. And when the inauguration happened, I had grown up in the suburbs outside Philadelphia. I had never backpacked before in my life, and there was always this allure there, like there's something there that seems magical. And when I got to the inauguration of that election cycle, I was like, I really just need to take a step back before I really devote myself to being a political reporter. And I stopped everything I was doing. I left my position and I went and hiked the Appalachian Trail in the dead of winter alone. And I had never done anything like that. So the whole, everybody thought I was crazy in my circles in Boston and Philly. And I probably was a little crazy, but I just set out, and I had an experience that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. And it just changed my whole life. So that's how I got my start. I mean, I have a backbone in reporting, and then I found nature through that hike. It was 2,000 miles of just really challenging freedom. Is a good way to, maybe encapsulate what you find on a through hike. And through that, I found just a whole lot of peace and really great stories. I found that people opened up in a way when you were through hiking that was unparalleled to anything I had experienced in my reporting to that point. And also, I just loved the stories that happen on a through hike. So after that, I shifted my career and I started to really focus on nature, stories attached to nature in some capacity, whether it's more traditional reporting, stories on issues like that are attached to the climate crisis, whether it's vanishing fisheries or endangered species, but also adventure films. And that led me to my first adventure film, which was As It Happens, Pacific Crest Trail. Yeah, which was over 10 years ago now, which is crazy. I'm an old man.
We're all getting that way.
Well, if you're old, then what are we? Damn near dead.
Damn near dead. Knocking a desk door.
You said people opened up more when you were just talking. So on the trails. So what do you exactly mean by that?
I think there's something when you come into somebody's world and you only have a backpack. You're very unassuming in that way. You're not coming into it with any kind of like power, really. I mean, a lot of it is like you're coming into it very humble, because often it's hitchhiking to town for food, or you're just coming across them on trail and there's already a kinship there because there's some shared love of the natural world. And people are more open because of that. So, you know, and the conversations often might not even have to do with nature. It might just be about their lives. But some of those stories that I've unearthed over the years on through hikes are some of my favorite stories because they're just really touching. And also, especially with the people you hike with. And that's another big factor. It's not just the people you meet along the way, but the camaraderie that you built. And you start as strangers and very quickly you become friends and then trail family. And in that process, those people really open up and you can get to deep layers of people that maybe they haven't even thought about for a long time. And the portraits that I'm able to capture on a through hike are so much richer than the portraits that I would capture in a typical reporting assignment where I drop in for a day or two, you know, and it's not the same. And I just find that it's really a lot more, it creates a lot more engagement when you're able to peel the onion, when you're able to get all the layers of somebody and find out these really amazing stories. People do cool things and go through really hard times. And I love it when nature is a part of that mix. To me, it's just the best.
I was going to say that maybe when we backpack and we only bring the bare necessities, and it's very symbolic of what we do with our personalities as well. Maybe leave out the unnecessary stuff and just come in with the core essentials, and which is makes it a lot easier to get to know someone else because you get to see the essentials of someone else, you know, the core of the person instead of the personas that come over on top of the core. However, you and I run the other way soon as we see hikers.
we
Bring too much stuff.
we can be kind of antisocial.
We're antisocial,
yeah, you know,
on the trail as
well,
well as
there's a reason you go to wilderness, right? I mean, it is to escape a lot of. I mean, I live in the city. I live in the heart of San Diego, so and ever since for the last 15 plus years, I've always lived in the heart of big cities: New York City, Boston, DC, Philly, now the West Coast. I mean, there's something to be said for the communities you can find in cities, but it's also really nice to get out on a trail run and have nobody in sight, you know, for a couple hours in the morning, which I do several times a week, you know. Yeah, it's a balancing act, you know. I think it was Thoreau that said it, you know, solitude is a nice place to visit, but not live. And I think it is a balancing act, right? Like, you know, it's nice to have that solitude, but you can also find out a lot about yourself by meeting new people, because the stories that you tell people that you just met it's a story that you're telling yourself. And when you're meeting new people and you're spending that kind of time with people, you start to think about your story a little differently. You know, maybe it's been a minute since you've reflected on really how you got to where you're at. And I just think all of it is a great way to just really get a better perspective on yourself and your place in the world.
So I have to ask, what's your trail name?
My trail name's Camel.
Camel?
Yeah.
Now, is that because you don't need to drink water, or?
Yeah, it's because every day on the AT, my buddy, who was the opposite of me and drank a ton of water, I always had my Camelback was full at the end of each day. And I always usually wound up, giving everybody else the water that I just slugged around and never actually drank. So I got the nickname Camel. So that's how I got it.
We're about the same. Well, not we. I'm the camel, and you're.
You said I'm the brains.
You're the. If we have limited amount of supplies, I get the carbs and he gets the water.
All right, there you go. That's a fair trade.
And then on the trail, I get to pack all the camera equipment, and she gets to have all the essentials.
That's a good trade-off too. The camera equipment it adds up. My camera equipment totals more than my pack weight, my base weight.
Yeah. So how much is your overall pack that you're hauling with you on the trail?
My base weight for my pack is about 8 pounds with like all my essentials. And then my camera equipment is probably about 10 pounds of camera equipment between batteries and lenses, the camera itself. And I usually have a gimbal with me, which is a prime feature in the series through Pacific Northwest that really kind of elevates its production value. But yeah, I mean, I work on 2 different series right now, out of San Diego, and they're not hiking series. And the camera, it's amazing. I mean, we have hundreds of pounds of camera gear that we haul from shoot to shoot to shoot all over for those series. But on a through hike, obviously, it's kind of like a haiku. You have a limited amount that you can carry, so you better have, the right tools, and each tool better be pretty flexible so that you can use it in a variety of situations, and it's reliable, and you can get the production quality you want, and keeping it relatively simple. So you're kind of limited. So I kind of cap it at 10 pounds, because other than that, it gets dangerous, right? Because sometimes I might need to haul out 10 days of food plus lots of water if it's a dry section, and I just don't want to have an extreme weight on my back.
Mhm.
So I cap it at 10 pounds. But yeah.
And so on your first film, what was the gear you used on?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I mean, so I was like, my training is in writing. My learned education is in writing. That was just, I just had a Canon Rebel, which is like, I mean, any iPhone is far surpasses what that camera could do that I had on that hike. But regardless of the tool, it was just a great opportunity. The Pacific Crest Trail and Making As It Happens was just a great opportunity just to learn how to play with the camera. Just like how, like I had nothing to do besides walk and play with the camera for 6 months. So, reporting aside, just learning how to get shots, like how to look at details, not only the big stuff, but the tiny stuff, and just shape my eye. I call it dirt time. I had a lot of dirt time on that hike. And so I self-taught myself the camera work during that. And then when I got done the hike, to do the edit for that, I had never really edited before. So I had to learn how to edit. So now that's like something I have tens of thousands of hours in producing all the films I've made and everything, and it's essential to my job. But that project was great because it taught me how to do camera work, or at least got my feet wet, and it also got my feet wet and gave me a reason to learn how to edit. And obviously those are really essential to filmmaking, both those skill sets. And it's a craft. Each of those I'm constantly pushing myself to just get better at, to be more creative with both of those capacities. So yeah, that project really was formative for filmmaking, for me becoming a filmmaker.
And were there any what was kind of your inspiration to film? I mean, was it like you saw somebody do it, like, there's so many through hike videos on YouTube, or was there someone in particular, or was it just kind of a natural organic thing that came up and you had to go, let's capture this whole adventure on the Pacific Crest?
Well, when I hiked the Appalachian Trail, I had this experience that was unlike anything I had ever experienced, but also unlike anything I had really ever seen in TV. And immediately after that AT, I went and worked at Discovery Channel in the development department. And at the time, Man vs. Wild was just going, gangbusters as one of the top programs. And I kind of like had like a lot of beef with that program, because I was like, well, what happens if it's like not Man versus Wild? What if it's like person connecting with wilderness? What about that? Because like the stories that they were capturing in that program were so unlike anything I experienced on a through hike.
Right.
So I pitched the idea inside the development department to do something like through the Pacific Northwest, something big that would capture just a through hike in a really thoughtful and really high production value way. And they ultimately didn't bite. So when my contract ran out, I was like, all right, well, I should just do this project myself. And so then I went and I started to try to get funding and and get it together. And but that was really it. Like, I wanted to do nature programming after the AT. I didn't really like the nature programming, and I was really young, but I didn't like what was being produced, or didn't see the experience that I had. And I knew that there was something really powerful there that was being missed. So then I just went out as an independent and tried to capture it in As It Happens. And it's been kind of still that journey. Like, I have a lot of films in between As It Happens and through the Pacific Northwest that I did, but I still, even after a decade, I still, one of my favorite stories to tell is the story of a long walk. So. Yeah.
And when you was the Pacific Crest your second big through hike?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So have you done them all? Have you done the Continental Divide?
I have not done the Continental Divide yet. I have done the AT, the PCT. I did half the Arizona Trail, and you find out why it's only half in episode 2 of Through the Pacific Northwest, like a flashback chapter. And then I did the Pacific Northwest Trail too. So I haven't done the CDT. I kind of had plans to do the CDT, but then I got a film offer to do a film, and I took that by the horns, and yeah, it just kind of has eluded me and as an adult a little bit. I mean, I have 6 months is now very hard for me to get
right.
Protected time on, but also just it's yeah, I don't know, it's there, and it's exciting to think about the prospect of doing it, and I will do it. But at this point, I'm thinking maybe I'll just wait a couple of years and do it with my son. But we'll see.
So we were kind of talking about this connection that you get with trail time. What's the hardest part for you, either as a hiker doing a through trip or as a filmmaker? What's the hardest thing to overcome?
Well, I'll tell you what the easiest thing is. The easiest thing is walking.
Right.
By far the easiest part. The hiking part is easy. As a hiker, the hardest part is probably at this point in my life is just getting the protected time to go away and not leave my family hanging. I think that's easily the hardest part now as a hiker. But as a filmmaker, the hardest part is all the stuff that doesn't have to do with creative. All the distribution, having to find funding, having to do, like all the legal stuff. All that stuff is a lot of energy. And I mean, it's partly because of COVID, but also just trying to make sure we had good distribution for Through the Pacific Northwest took so long. I mean, part of it was because it was been crazy with COVID, but just, yeah, all that stuff is not fun. Again, hiking thousands of miles, that's like piece of cake. That's like the easy loving part. Everything
right.
else around that is the hard part. Yeah.
So kind of the other thing is when you made your first film, since you self-funded this whole, this was your own project from start to finish. How do I put it? All right, since it was your project from start to finish, what was the goal at the end in terms of distribution or audience? Because I know it's had 1 million, which means it's somewhere over 1 million views on YouTube now. What was kind of the idea for, okay, where am I going to put this? Who's going to see this?
Well, I think at the time there actually weren't that many through hiking videos on YouTube, because you're talking before Wild, right? I mean,
right.
This is my film, as it happens, came out in the same winter that Wild came out, just happened to be when. But when I was making the film, I mean, it took me several years to make the film. There was like one PCT documentary on YouTube. So right. The intention was honestly just to make it and just to put it on YouTube. I didn't really have any distribution plan for that film, which is why it's on YouTube. Now YouTube has changed a lot, and YouTube is actually a really amazing space to create in and can be viable as a professional to work in. But at the time, it was really just like, oh, I got this film. I don't really know what to do with it. I didn't even try to distribute it any other way besides just put it on YouTube for everybody to see. So, but it led to a lot of great opportunities. And Through the Pacific Northwest, that series, partly, I mean, it's led to a lot of great opportunities professionally for me, even though it's free. I mean, the intention was just to get people excited about through hiking.
Right.
At the time I made it, there were a lot less through hikers out there, especially on the Pacific Crest. I mean, you're talking like maybe 250, 300 people a year trying the PCT, and maybe less than 100 finishing. So, I mean, significantly different times when I made that film. But I mean, obviously, I think Wild had Wild had a larger reach than As It Happens, but I would like to think that As It Happens has reached people and touched people and inspired them to go on journeys of their own, because that's my goal as a filmmaker. That's my goal. It's just to inspire people to set out on their own journeys.
So we just got back from Zion just a couple days ago. So we did Zion
That's right.
and Bryce Canyon, and one being antisocial. See, there's no way to get away from people in those places. Even though we got to hike the subway and we hardly saw, we had spans of an hour or so where we didn't see another person, which was really nice. But you see so many people in the national parks, they're just getting crushed and inundated, and kind of the thing on the through hikes too. Now that there's popularity, there's, who knows how many people are already on the Pacific Crest,
I mean, I was just out on the Pacific Crest this weekend with my kids, and we shared banana bread and beer in our camp on Sunday morning with like maybe 5 through hikers who kind of rolled up. And we were just out in the section here in Southern California. I think, my newer goal, I guess, is to just spread the wealth. I mean, there's 11 national scenic trails, and there's not an equal distribution of people attempting those routes and kind of exploring all of them. It's more concentrated on the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest, the big 3, the CDT, right, to a degree. So, but there's 8 other ones. So it's just like highlighting those, and also creating more national scenic trails. Like, it's insane that Utah does not have a national scenic trail given the amount of public federal land in Utah. Like, it blows my mind. So as a filmmaker and as somebody who advocates for through hiking, I think that more routes should be opened up, and I think that people should take a look at all the trails, because there's amazing trails. Like the Pacific Northwest Trail is an amazing trail. Arizona Trail. There's like smaller ones like the New England Trail up in I think it's Vermont, Massachusetts. So there's a bunch. So yeah.
That could. So, and where I was kind of going with that is that with people finding this and kind of spreading the wealth, you kind of go to a national park and it's just inundated with people. And even in Montana, like even from when COVID started, maybe even a little before COVID, a trailhead that you used to go to, that maybe there's going to be one other vehicle there. Now there's 10 vehicles, or you got to figure out how to park at that trailhead. Do you think there's ever a risk of, loving something to death, without dispersing people? Because everyone wants to go to the Zion and they want to go to Angel's Landing and they want to get that Instagram photo.
Yeah, I think the beauty of long trails is that they're hard. It's hard to do a long trail. It kind of it spares down it kind of whittles down the crowd, if you will, because it's hard to hike 1,000 miles or 2,000 miles or 3,000 miles. So when you get down to it, the folks that are able to do those hikes are folks. It takes down the numbers pretty quickly. I mean, there's something like 30% of people who start through hikes quit after 3 days because it's not like you expect. I think there's probably a better expectation for the reality nowadays because there's so much literature and videos on the experience. But I mean, yeah, it's a hard thing to do. So if you take on a through hike, yeah, they're definitely more crowded, but that's also the point, is you want to have people on trails because you want to have advocates for trails. People won't protect things that they don't know. And part of the reason to get people out on trails and out in these public lands is to get them to not only know them, but love them. And if you love something, you protect it. So that's kind of you can definitely love something to death, but that's usually just bad recreation principles. And the through hiking community is really leave no trace, very light compared to the industrial tourism of national parks, which is quite frankly horrendous. So
that's what we were trying. Yeah, I guess that's what Rad's alluding to.
It's a different user group, and I think that people gravitate to through hikes, become that type of user group that is that incredibly light footstep compared to other types of outdoor rec. And you can't really be you can't maintain in the through hiker crowd if you're not leaving, or if you're not embodying those principles of leave no trace, because you're going to get called out again and again if you're with people and you're not following protocols, because it's part of the culture, which is not part of the culture of a lot of folks that just go parking lot visiting at national parks and
Right.
rely on hotels and all the infrastructure that it just makes the modern national park visits kind of missing the point. You know, that's, I mean, I could go on, but yeah, I think that,
Right.
you know, through hikers in general are really respect the space and
Mhm.
leave it as it was.
I was about to say that I didn't see any videos out there, but I think it'd be very useful. He mentioned protocol, but what he assumes the common knowledge of protocol is not all that common. You know, where
Mhm.
we see a lot of people, you know, kind of doing something that's not in the protocol, but they have absolutely no knowledge of it. I mean, it's not intentional
Right.
that they, and if they knew better, they would do better. So, which is what I think
Yeah.
there should be an educational, I don't know, nah, well, it should be taught somewhere. I preferably in school, I would say, you know, if you have math, physics, biology, and maybe wildlife,
Outdoor
outdoors
responsibility.
responsibility, just, and I think
Yeah.
people would do better and if they knew better.
Mhm.
But
Well, I think as it becomes more of a cultural cornerstone, things like through hiking, which it's, you know, in the last 30 years, the through hiking community has really grown, right? And
Mhm.
before it was an anomaly. It was like you were kind of a screwball if you went and tried to hike the length of a long trail. But now it's becoming more culturally normal for, you know, to use a gap year between school or maybe just after you retire to take on a through hike. And I think the more it becomes a cultural cornerstone, the more likely you are to have institutions backing up recreate responsibly. I know for us with through, I mean, we got early support from the Pacific Northwest Trail Association, and their support being that they were excited about the project. And we even have a thing on their website that's a little excerpt from through, but also has all the links for how to recreate responsibly and to know the uniqueness of the Pacific Northwest Trail. And that's really the regard and the responsibility of the associations that steward the trails, is to put out as much information as possible about the uniqueness of whatever trail you're hiking, but also how to recreate responsibly on them. And I
Mhm.
think there's a lot more effort there because the numbers are increasing for through hikers just across the country, um, to make sure that people are recreating responsibly on those hikes. Um, yeah, which, and I think that, yeah, it would be great if they did it in public schools, if they had a component, you know, that taught kids. I mean, there's so much to it, but it's also really simple. It's like things that you kind of take for granted if you've been out long enough in the backcountry.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, maybe in time we'll see.
So kind of the shift gears forward, you mentioned the uniqueness of the Pacific Northwest Trail.
Hmm.
Why? What makes the Pacific Northwest Trail one? I think a real challenge because you're up, you know, you're higher latitude the whole time you're doing it. And what do you think are the most unique aspects of the Pacific Northwest Trail?
The Pacific Northwest Trail is a choose your own adventure route. It's like a third single track trail. It's a third bushwhack slash scramble, and a third just road walking, a road of some sort, whether it's a dirt road in the backcountry or a paved road, like going down all of Whidbey Island off of the Olympic, or off of Washington's coast there, all road for like, I don't know, 20 plus miles or something. But yeah, so it's and each time you get to a scramble bushwhack, you're kind of making a decision between low and high route. So it's kind of this like, just in terms of that, it's unique. It goes through these really wild corridors that are pretty remote, especially in those bushwhack scramble sections
Mhm.
that aren't, there's no trail that's developed there. Um, so like that is incredibly unique. It's also at a higher latitude, so you have a much shorter window, a much tighter window to accomplish it. Most through hikers can't start until July because it's so far north. If you're, you can't start, it starts in Glacier National Park, and Glacier National Park doesn't open up till like July 4th. So you have a really tight window to kind of accomplish it. And also, the ending, if you do end out on the Olympic Peninsula, is on the coast, which is, tidal. You're dealing with tide charts and all that kind of stuff, which is really unique to that trail. It's also the only National Scenic Trail that involves a motorized vehicle, which is the ferry that takes you across the Puget Sound to Port Townsend. So there's a lot of unique aspects to the hike that just make it like incredibly rewarding and also really unique.
So what's the longest bushwhack section that you had?
Oh man, this was a few years ago now. I want to say probably, I think most bushwhacks are anywhere from like maybe it could be started like just a mile of bushwhacking to maybe up to 15 miles, something like that. I think the longest one is actually in Idaho in the Selkirks. But I can't fully remember that. But it's kind of weird. You'll be hiking on a single track for 5 miles, and then you'll dump out on a dirt road, and you'll be on the dirt road for maybe, I don't know, 7 miles, and then all of a sudden it's like, okay, now it's time to just clear off and bushwhack to connect with another single track trail, and maybe that bushwhack is 3 miles. So that that's what a day looks like. So it's kind of hard to get into a solid rhythm like the PCT or the AT or something like that, where you have a marked route and you're just kind of mindlessly going. You're constantly like assessing like where you're at. And there's GPS now, there's GPS waypoints that make it a lot easier than it used to be, where you're really relying on the guide and maps. You obviously still have paper maps, but the GPS really keeps you grounded as far as knowing where you're at, because sometimes those bushwhacks are pretty thick in terms of vegetation. And
And so this kind of this choose your own adventure hike right now on the Pacific Northwest Trail, is there plans to promote maybe like some of those bushwhack sections of getting a trail built, or kind of coming up with a more established route that's a little more ease of travel?
Yeah, I think it's definitely for the road sections, they definitely would like to get it, not just like, I think it's part of National Scenic Trails planning, is it has to meet a certain standard in terms of what the trail provides. And so getting the stuff off of the roads onto a single track trail is definitely a priority. And then I know that the intention of the founder of the trail, Ron Strickland, was to have a lot of the bushwhack sections be on the high route. So the ideal route is typically the high route, which high for the views, right? So like you're going up onto the spine of a mountain and cutting a single track trail up there. And these are all places that are already used, like, and even without through hikers, like you can already see some foot traffic in these particular routes, because people do these routes even if they're not hiking the length of the Pacific Northwest Trail. But typically, I think in time they would like to, just like the PCT and the AT, have the whole trail on single track would probably be the most ideal. And it would change the nature of the trail to have that for sure. But it would also guarantee that trail is preserved for future generations to get it on single track.
And when you were making through, and so this was a very intentional through hike to make through, what's kind of the typical filming day or filming / hiking day, and how do you determine when to put the camera away and just really hike and when to take it out? And
it's a tricky balance to hike 20 plus miles a day. On the PNT, it was 20 plus miles a day plus 3K vert up and 3K vert down average for every day. So they were beefy days inside of mixed terrain, and it was challenging just as a hiker, let alone trying to film it. We went at it as a team. My colleague Peter Hockhauser, my co-creator on the first season, he's from Austria. I saw his video online. It's called "This Is Not a Beautiful Hiking Video." You should Google it. And I saw that and I was like, oh, this is a guy who likes to hike and film. How rare. Because a lot of times people really don't like to film and hike, right? They see them as kind of oil and water. But I reached out to him and was like, hey, if we do this as a team, then we'll be able to achieve a higher production value. So we looped in somebody who I'd worked with in Utah prior, Brennan Bartlett, who is a time-lapse cinematographer, and we attacked it as a team. We approached it as a team. Like, I had the gimbal, so I was doing a lot of the moving work for a lion's share of it. Peter had a long lens. Brennan did the time-lapse work, and we just kind of did it by feel. I mean, you know, in terms of capturing the spaces, that's like the easy part. The physical landscape is the easy part, but like the hard part was the mental landscapes. And that's where the story is, right? Like, that's like the heart of it. Like, well, the physical stuff and like the beautiful landscapes, that's piece of cake. We can do that all day, you know. But the mental landscape and doing the journalism to capture the mental landscapes of each person in the crew, people met along the way, the team dynamics as they grow, because I had never met Peter before we set out in Montana. So yeah, we were perfect strangers. I mean, we had set up the project, but we had never met. That was the goal, was to show strangers becoming, you know, trail buddies, or, you know, trail family. So that showing that evolution was, to me as a filmmaker and a journalist, the hardest part, the mental landscape, like by far, in terms of what we were capturing out there. But we would just take time, you know, it's like, oh, hey, let's do some walk and talks. I'm going to give you the camera with the gimbal, say whatever's on your mind right now, and we'll give you some space so you can say it privately, and we won't unearth it until after the hike. So a lot of it, when we got done the hike, was very interesting to me, because I was rewatching the hike, but I was watching all these perspectives of my colleagues, my crewmates, that I was not privy to, right? So and then at times, like, being a journalist and being like, oh, I think something's going on with, you know, Brennan, like, I need to put a camera in his face and ask him some hard questions, you know, which wasn't always easy, but it was a balancing act of like, I'm your friend, but we're also filmmakers. So we're like doing this.
Right.
Did you guys include all the incidences where you wanted to choke the life out of each other?
Yeah, I mean, there's no
because that definitely happens.
There's no stone left unturned in the series. We originally intended to make a film. It wasn't supposed to be a series, but after we got done the first stretch, I was like, just knowing how much we shot card wise, I was like, gosh, we shot a lot. I feel like we already have enough for a feature length, and we just got out of Glacier National Park, but you know, so by the end, I just knew we had this wealth of story, and the goal was to not have a fourth wall, right? So like, when Peter is talking to me, I'm just holding the camera here, and it feels like he's talking to you as a viewer, but he's really talking to me, Andy, right? So like, we pretty much used almost every square inch of usable footage and story point to shape the narrative from the Continental Divide, and that includes all the blunders and all the I mean, of course, that's like, you know, that's such
part
a big
of
part
the journey.
Of course, yeah, totally. Like me eating shit, like falling down with the camera when I'm trying to film something. I mean, there's a lot of the blooper type things you would expect in the outtakes are totally just like integrated into the storyline throughout the episodes.
So. Or when one of you gets too hangry.
Yeah. There's lots of moments of that, but yeah,
we laugh because somebody out of the two of us is super guilty of being hangry.
I find that I'm more hangry in civilization, because like, I know I should have food here, like right here I got a big thing of peanuts, right? Like, but like in the backcountry, there's like a thing in my head that just switches, where it's like, you know, food is rationed, and I don't know, I actually become less hangry in the backcountry than I do in regular life, or in civilization, if you will. I don't know. It's a perspective shift. I don't know. I think my body goes into this thing as I've done enough through hikes where it's like, oh, we're in through hiking mode. We're going to be hungry a lot. Like, we better just get comfortable.
Switch it off.
You know? Yeah. So anyway.
So out of all the characters that you meet along the trail, I mean, is there one or two that really stick out, especially on the Pacific Northwest Trail when you did through? Is there a couple characters that just stick out in your memory, whether they made the film or not, that were just, you know, that guy, that person is so memorable?
Yeah, I mean, I think the first time we got Trail Magic was pretty amazing. Cliff Kramer in Idaho he just like we got there late to his little backcountry. It's like a bar restaurant and it's kind of like a hunting lodge, I guess,
Mhm.
because it's in the middle of nowhere. And we got there late and we had dinner there, and then he was chatting with us really nice. And then we were like, well, what time do you open up for breakfast? And he was like, well, we don't serve breakfast. And we're like, oh, that sucks, because all we have are like a dried out bagel, for the next morning. And he was like, well, if you want breakfast, I'll just leave the keys and you can just, use our kitchen and use anything in the fridge to make breakfast. So it's just like, like what an amazing, like I just met him that night and he was like, yeah, here's the keys to my restaurant. Just like do what you want. And we made this beautiful breakfast the next morning. It was like just opened his doors to us, just to have that trust was just like a great, reinforcer of what I love about through hiking.
Mhm.
So he was great. There's lots of characters across the series. There's also people that kind of came in and out of the crew. There's a guy named Leftfoot who just like us. He was through hiking, but he also liked his alone time. So he would like be alone and then he'd come with us for a stretch and then he'd come out, and I just really enjoyed his perspective. And he was also like a amateur mycologist for the mushrooms. So he helped us source some beautiful morels in Eastern Washington. And that turned into a beautiful story where we kind of brought them into a town with a trail angel and made a huge, I mean, we got a lot of morels,
Mhm.
but that wouldn't have happened without him. So, that was really amazing. And yeah, there's just that's the thing is like on a through hike, it's all about those stories, those highs and the lows that you have with people that are so memorable. And that was our goal, was to just capture them vividly and through. Yeah.
Now, and I had to ask anyone that does some. So a previous interview we did an ultra marathoner, and she was absolutely fascinating. She finished. What did she finish? 40th in the Hard Rock 100 this past year. So she's
Mm-hmm.
kind of an ultra stud. And what's always amazing people to do these long distances, whether it's a through hike or an ultra marathon, how do you keep your feet healthy? Because I have the worst time because I have plantar fasciitis. My feet get sore and tender. What are you doing just on the recovery and physical angle to keep your body going?
Yeah. I've done an ultra marathon too. Actually, a year ago this week, I did the Zion 100K, which was just insane. And I got lost.
Congratulations.
Yeah,
It's not easy.
it was not easy. It was not. There was very little pleasure in that activity. I much
Yes.
prefer through hiking.
Yes, precisely.
But yeah, keeping your feet healthy. I mean, everybody has different feet, and like some folks like Brennan on the hike, he tried all these different shoes, and his feet were just getting obliterated. And then he wound up switching to Chaco sandals, and that was the ticket. He switched to those, and he didn't have any blisters anymore. So footwear choice, like if something's not working, if as much as you're fiscally able to, switch it out with something else that's different and try it, because everybody's feet are so different and it's different for everybody. The other thing is don't let it go too long. Like if you get blisters, make sure you're treating them and you're keeping them infection free is a big one. And the other thing too is just like on the daily, keeping your feet dry. Anytime you take a break, get them out of your shoes and air them out. It's nice to have two pairs of socks so you can kind of like, you can just, switch them out. So if your socks get really sweaty and grimy, you can like wash them in the creek, tie them to your pack, and then have that other pair that was just hanging there and put on a fresh pair midday. And then when those get grimy, you got the other ones you just washed out that are probably dry now, and just keep switching throughout the day and just keeping the dirt and the moisture away from your feet, because that's going to rub and create blisters and stuff. But I will say that I'm maybe a little unique in that I have incredibly flat feet, and I have never really had a problem. I've hiked for thousands of miles and I've gotten like one blister in my life. So I don't know.
Nice.
I don't know what that superpower is, but I have it.
That's your superpower.
It's a superpower. I can't empathize with people who really have gotten their feet torched myself, but I've seen it and I've seen how people deal with it. And I don't know if I'm just lucky, but literally I have no arch, and I don't know if that incredible flatness has something to do with it, but I just haven't really had many foot problems. Obviously they ache and they get sore if you're doing 20, 25, 30-mile days back to back to back to back. But yeah, it hasn't really been an issue for me. Yeah, it just hasn't been an issue. Not yet. I don't know. Maybe next one. Maybe the next one I'll break my streak.
So when you were filming and editing through, were you already in a relationship with Outside TV at that point?
No.
Okay.
I mean, when I say independent, I'm an independent documentary filmmaker.
Mhm.
I'll usually find some seed funders that can get it off the ground, pay for some of the field costs. And this goes for hiking films or for my more reporting films, whether I'm reporting on something in the Everglades or whatever it is.
Right.
But once I have a little bit of money that can cover the basis of just field production, then I go out and I do it, and I do it to fulfill my vision as an independent. And then after I'm done, then I go and I pitch it to networks. So that's my model so far. So yeah.
All right. And so the first part of now, how many was there? 8 episodes go through?
Yeah, there's 8 episodes.
Yeah.
Yep.
So the first 8 episodes are on Outside TV. And what's kind of the plan going forward? Is there going to be a second season and a third season, and then?
Yeah, I mean that's the goal. I mean, we want Through to be a platform that has lots of journeys on it, and just keep getting better at capturing journeys, and show the diversity of experiences that are on journeys, from the landscapes to the people who take them on, to those people's experiences in those landscapes. So our goal is to just continue, and I've already shot the second season. It's kind of a shorter piece, but I'm in edit on that right now, and that'll come out sometime after the Pacific Northwest,
Right.
and then kind of plotting towards the next one as well, which we'll see when that hike happens.
Well, maybe take the whole family with you. There's a dynamic for us.
Yeah, I mean, I just had my kids out this weekend on the PCT. My son's name is Walker, so there's a lot of expectation there. But yeah, I've definitely thought about that. I would love to. I mean, I love the dynamic of a parent and their kid out in the backcountry. So yeah, that's on my radar as well for potential projects. Yeah, but it is hard to be a hiker, a parent, and a filmmaker all at the same time.
Right. Well, especially if you're trying to do all 3 at the same time.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard you get over here. Oh, you messed that shot up. I gotta get you back.
Yeah, and just and keeping kids focused is hard enough. But yeah.
So
but I do love hiking with my kids. Yeah.
Sorry, would you say that's the biggest challenge you have?
What do you mean?
Wearing many different hats, father, a hiker, and a filmmaker.
Yeah, I think.
Or balancing balancing all 3, because hiking is very time consuming, and that's time away from family. But at the same time, you kind of have to provide for the family, or at least be there.
Yeah, both.
Both.
Yeah, it's hard. Yeah, it's definitely hard. I mean, my job takes me out. I was just shooting on the East Coast for like 8 days, and I just got back like last week, and I'm slated to go back out again for another shoot. In some ways, actually filming a through hike is a little more conducive to a more regular schedule, because you're gone for a period of time, but then the edit takes so long. I mean, the edit for Through took 9 months. So I was home for 9 months editing that. So because 8 episodes, it's 6 hours of content. That's a lot to create. It's not, a 5-minute video or even an hour-long video. It was like just an insane amount of. But I work from home. This is my home. So when I'm home, I'm really home. But when I'm away, I'm really away. But for other series work, I'm in and out a lot, which is actually in some ways more stressful, because like I'm in field mode for a week, and then I'm back home for a week or two, and then I'm back in field mode for a week. It's like it's hard to get in a rhythm sometimes with that. So, but it's just like some guys are truck drivers. They got to get in the truck and they got to do their thing to make a living. And for me, as a documentary filmmaker, there's field time and there's edit time. And the field time means daddy's away from home and you only see him on FaceTime if I'm lucky, if I have service.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
What
yeah.
would you say? Would you say there are some myths about through hiking?
I think that like a common misconception is when you get out there, you're just going to have these aha moments, and we certainly capture those aha moments in Through. But the goal of Through was to also show all the context for those moments, like what it took to get to those moments. Like, you know, you don't have this like amazing realization like just because you're on a mountaintop. You have it because
With
there
the
was some
V
sort of
arms and all, right? You know.
yeah, we have that shot, but what did it take to get to that shot? And a lot of the what it took to get to that shot are things like tedium, you know, just being with yourself for really long periods of time, right? Or just like slugging through the tedium of a really long road walk, or just being really uncomfortable for a long time. I mean, a lot of through hiking is really uncomfortable, like 70% suck. I mean, it's a high ratio of like being uncomfortable. And so I think, yeah, I think people maybe, you know, they look at Instagram or they look at something and they don't see the full story of what a through hike really is. And when they get out there, they're like, oh, this is not what I expected, you know? And I think, you know, when you embrace the uncomfortableness is when really magical things can happen, but there's a lot of discomfort in through hiking. Yeah.
Mhm.
I do have one question. What was your biggest fuck up?
My biggest fuck up. I think in relation to like through the Pacific Northwest, or like as a filmmaker or as a hiker. That's a broad
So I
question.
take it there's more than one or
There's,
two.
there's categories of fuck ups, you know. This
Yeah,
one goes here. This
we
one's a
we
bad
all have
bucket.
missteps. But yeah, what can you
How
be
about
more
as a
specific?
hiker? How
As
about
a hiker, what was your biggest fuck up and what did you learn from that?
I think the biggest thing was like, and it's kind of what I was just speaking to, but like, just like being comfortable with the uncomfortable. Cause like when I first started hiking in the AT, it was really snowy, it was cold, I was super uncomfortable, and I would just get really pissed off when things happened. Like if I slipped or if I would get to a water source and it was just totally frozen over, like I would just get explosively angry. I mean, I was young, I was 21, 22 at the time. And like it happened enough times where like one time, like I literally was so angry that I fell, that I took my trekking pole and I whacked it against a tree, and the trekking pole just broke in
Poor
half.
book.
And then I was like, oh, well, I'm an idiot because now I don't have a trekking pole for the rest of this stretch, you know, the last
Nice.
50 miles of this stretch or whatever it was. And it was like a realization, like, well, that was a fuck up because that didn't solve anything, you know? So I would say like, just like the early blunders of hiking, you know, like just getting angry for no reason, or like being angry with the inability to control the situation. Like, you know, and there was a lot of moments like that. And those are like the things that eventually round you out and really, you know, just make you more flexible as a person in the long run. But yeah, I had a lot of those moments early on, especially on the Appalachian Trail, especially.
Cool.
Well, I was gonna say, you know, it's like the path to enlightenment.
Sure,
When you read
yeah.
through the literature of Buddhism philosophy,
Yeah, right.
that's usually when you're hiking. It just you know, you come across all those scenarios,
Mhm.
or actually
Right.
have to, and then you have to work through them rather than talk about working through them.
100%. And you know, I grew up without any spiritual background. Like I never went to church or anything. I never had any sense of that. And I think the thing that hiking brought me was just that there was a world out there beyond Andy, right? Like there's a bigger world that I'm operating in a bigger universe. And you go through all these little lessons like that, breaking the hiking pole, and you kind of write your own little, I don't know, your own little Bible, if you will. Like you kind of write your own moral grounding on a through hike, like with the people that you meet from all different walks of life, to the experience that you have that are really specific, you know. And yeah, it kind of is like without getting like too deep, like a path to enlightenment, because when you get to the end of it, your corners your hard opinions are really ground down, and you become a much more open person to folks, and to yourself. You have this experience that I think a lot of people are longing for in today's world, and I didn't anticipate that. I really didn't, and it has been very grounding for me in life.
You say lots of people are pining for it or looking for it, which is, the grasp of different things, whether it's therapy, religion, or whatever. But, I think instead of becoming a monk or a nun, you could just become a through hiker. It's like a fast track.
Totally. I don't know if it's a fast track, but it's definitely one option. It's only 3 miles an hour, so I don't know how fast it is, but it's definitely, it's definitely an experience. Yeah, I mean, again, one of my goals is just to get more people through hiking, and I really think you do turn out a happier person at the end of it. Happy in a more real way. I don't know. It's a way that even if the situation is not what you want, you're still able to find happiness in it, because that's just the nature of the through hike.
Talk about athletes or talk with, and you can, or hikers, runners, ultra runners. There's I don't know if you notice it, but there's always a presence about them. There's like a
calmness,
there's just like whatever it is on the surface, you can tell there's like a peaceful calmness behind it all. So this person's done shit.
Well, when you're uncomfortable
or seen some shit.
People also ask me, like, oh, when you go out why are you going out for another through hike? Like, you've already done that. It's like, it's such a dynamic situation. And like, even I'm 35 and it's still one of my favorite things to do is to go on a through hike. And it's because it's this dynamic situation that's always challenging you, even if you have a ton of experience. That's the beauty of the backcountry, is that, no matter how much experience you have, you can always be challenged. It's just constantly changing, as are you. So I can't say enough to the experiences. Like, once you have those experiences on trail, how they translate into your life is just it helps you take on big things and be at peace with challenging situations.
Do you have a hard time getting back into civilization once you're done with your hikes?
Well, I mean, as a parent, it's kind of this, like, you go from 0 to 100 miles an hour. You get home and all of a sudden it's like, whoa, the kids are all over you, and work obligations are all over you again. But often my hiking is kind of in tune with my work, where maybe it was the field work was the hiking, and now I'm coming back home and editing. I like to think that I've made it less of a contrast, because before I would go on a hike and then I'd get back to the city and I would work on some job that meant nothing to me, and it was hard to come back to. But now I've kind of shaped my career as, like, I go on a hike and I film it, and then I come home and a little piece of me is still in that hike, because in my edit is the stories from that hike. So like, I'm able to get back into my community in the city and really lean on that for just as a person, but I'm also still have my head in the clouds a bit, because my head is still putting together the story of what happened on that hike or that expedition. So I've made it easier for myself in taking the mountains home with me, if you will.
So you're kind of really fortunate that you have like this long tail of experience, because you get to look at that footage. Like, we look at footage of like old things. Oh, I remember that. Yeah, that reliving thing.
Yeah, it's a real. I mean, it's a luxury, but I've worked really hard to make it part of my program.
So it becomes so he can benefit from the hobby that you have, actually.
Yep.
Do you have any advice for people that are thinking about through hiking?
Just through hiking, not filming, just going out on a through hike?
Just through hiking, yes.
I would say the first thing, if you're thinking about it, is just buy a plane ticket, buy a bus ticket, whatever that first thing is. Like, because until you like put it into the universe, like, and actually do something that like sets a date, it's just going to be a thought that's just going to go by, and there's going to be excuses, and you're not going to do it because there's a million reasons to not do a through hike that all seem really worthy. There's never going to be a good time to through hike. So I always just say, like, if you're interested, just buy that bus ticket, buy the plane ticket, because then everything else is just details. You wrap the energy around, that's my start date. Start saying it out loud that you're doing it to people, and then you just figure out all the details. Half the battle is just getting to the
Get
start
started.
of a
Just
through hike.
pull the trigger, go for it.
Yep. And the other half is hiking the trail, the effort put in. But that's a monumental step, is to just buy your ticket to the start and start telling people, hey, I'm through hiking. I'm through hiking the Ice Age Trail. It's like that's the biggest piece of advice I can give to anybody who wants to through hike.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, we want to be respectful of your time here. We're at about an hour.
I got 2 questions.
Oh, she's loaded with questions. This woman is going to ask you something.
No, I just have.
I want you to be prepared.
Okay.
Okay. So, what would you do if you found a penguin in your freezer?
I found a penguin in my freezer. Well, I would call my boss at my day job. I work at a natural history production house. He is a PhD evolutionary biologist. And I would ask him why the hell a penguin is in my freezer in San Diego, California.
Oh, so you're thinking it's an evolutionary step for the penguin?
I would want to, I would want to know what's going on, and then film it beautifully, like Planet Earth style, of it like coming out of my fridge in like ultra 1,000 frames per second slow motion and everything else.
Right. The ice is shrinking, but there's still plenty of freezers. It's just a
Yeah,
transition.
Right, exactly.
Penguins are getting smarter, but somehow they followed you home, though.
True. I don't know how they made it through the heat of San Diego, but yeah.
So this penguin's been stalking you for a little while before he got to your house.
I guess so.
All right. What, you have one more?
Yeah. What's your spirit animal?
Spirit animal, probably like a street dog. I would think a street dog. Not like a house dog, but like a street dog. Because they're a little bit wild. They're also obviously a little bit tame, and they really operate well in packs. That would be my spirit animal, like a grungy,
Nice.
street dog. That would be it.
And if anyone listening to this wanted to contact you, where's a good platform for them to reach you?
Just go to throughfilm.com, THRUfilm.com, and that has links to my personal website, but it also is a great place to go because you can get the link to watch through. So, and that's what people listening should go watch right now.
Okay.
There you go.
Okay.
So Through Film on Outside TV, which is super cool. And I think I'm kind of interested in doing a through hike, but mine is relatively short. It's from this seat to the kitchen.
We forgot the most important question.
Oh, what's that?
What's your favorite beer?
Oh, what's my favorite beer?
I mean, you're wearing the tire.
Yeah, this is actually my favorite beer. Helix Brewing. It's in San Diego, and you can only get it at their tap room. But whenever I have a party, this is the beer I get. And also, the guy who started this, I do crazy trail runs and peak bagging with, so we're like best buddies.
Awesome.
But he also brews amazing beer. So Helix Brewing in San Diego. It's actually in La Mesa, just a little bit out, but it's
awesome.
Now I got a new quest. A new beer quest is Helix.
Yeah, you should come. Yeah, it's got a lot of awards, but it's a great spot. He has like, yeah, I could talk a lot about the beer, but yeah, Helix.
I think we're gonna go and then Google him.
I think there's going to be some Googling.
All
All right. Well, thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you. Appreciate it, guys.
Thanks for your time.
All right.
It was quite pleasurable listening to you and talking with you.